The next thing we're going to take a look at are angle pairs. And so we're just going to review some angle pairs that you probably have seen before. The first one we're going to take a look at is complementary angles. So complementary angles are two or more angles. They're said to be complementary if their sum is 90 degrees. So complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees. So in our example here, what we have is a straight line on the bottom, line ABE. We have this line this ray from B to D, and there's a little right angle here. So in a straight line, there's 180 degrees total. So if there's 90 degrees over here, there's also 90 degrees on the other side. So the angle ABC, this angle right here, is 11x minus 2, and the angle next to it, CBD, is also, it's labeled 5x minus 4. Those two angles are complementary. So what we know about them is that when we add them together, we should get 90 degrees. And at this point, you should be able to go ahead and solve for x. Supplementary angles are two or more angles whose sum is 180 degrees. So supplementary angles are angles that add up to 180 degrees. So in the picture here, we have two angles. We have angle ABC and we have the angle DBC, and they're both labeled. And those two angles together are going to add up to 180. So we have the one angle plus the second angle will add up to 180 degrees. And again, you should be able to solve that equation. Adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex and a common side, but have no interior points in common. So basically, these are two angles that are next to each other, they're touching each other, they share a vertex, they share a side, but they don't overlap in any way. So I'm going to do a couple other definitions first. Next one is linear pair. Two adjacent angles are a linear pair if their non-common sides are opposite rays. So linear to me makes me think of the word line. It's kind of hidden in here. And so two angles that are adjacent will form a straight line. So these two angles are adjacent. They're touching each other. They're next to each other. They share a side. And they form a straight line, so they would be a linear pair. And then two angles are vertical if their sides form two opposite rays. So vertical angles, when you have two intersecting lines, angles that are across from each other are vertical angles. And they are actually equal to each other. So what we have here is a pair of, or a picture with some angles labeled, and we're talking about some angle pairs. So we have angle 1 and angle 2. Angle 1 and angle 2 are next to each other. They're not complementary, they're not supplementary. They don't form a straight line, so they would be adjacent. Next pair is angle 4 and angle 5. They're right next to each other. They are adjacent angles, but they do form a straight line, and so that they would be a linear pair. Seven and 9. If you look at 7 and 9, those are also two angles that are next to each other. They are adjacent, but this time they form a straight line over here, so they would also be a linear pair. 6 and 9. 6 and 9 are right across from each other. They would be a pair of vertical angles. And then angle 2 and angle 6. Angle 2 and angle 6, they're not adjacent. They don't form a straight line. They're not across from each other. So they would be none of the above. All right, the other thing that we're going to take a look at are angle pairs when we have parallel lines. So with parallel lines, we usually have two parallel lines, and we have a transversal that kind of cuts through the two parallel lines. So if I open up this first flap, we have these two parallel lines cut by a transversal. This is the transversal that goes through and cuts the parallel lines. And what we have here are angles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So corresponding angles are angles that are in the same place. And they're actually going to be equal to each other. So an example would be like angle 1 and angle 5. If I were to take a pair of scissors and kind of cut the two intersections in half, angle 1 is on the top left-hand side on the top, and angle 5 is on the top left-hand side on that bottom. So they're in the same place. So that would be one pair of corresponding angles. Alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are angles that are inside the parallel lines, so we're limited to the angles that are inside, and alternate means that they're on different sides of the transversal. So something like angle 3 and angle 6, or angle 4 and angle 5. And alternate interior angles are also going to be equal. Vertical angles, we talked about those before, those are angles that are across from each other, so that would be something like angle 1 and angle 4, and vertical angles are also going to be equal. On the other side, alternate exterior angles, this time we're limited to the angles that are on the outside of the parallel lines, and alternate means they have to be on different sides of the transversal, so that would be something like angle 1 and angle 8, and alternate exterior angles are also going to be equal. Next one is consecutive interior angles. This might also be called co-interior angles. And co-interior angles are angles that are on the same side of the transversal, and they have to be inside. So that would be something like angle 3 and angle 5. And those angles are not equal. Those angles are going to be supplementary, which means that they add up to 180 degrees. And then our linear pair would be a pair of angles that actually physically form a straight line, something like angle 1 and angle 3. When we put them together, they physically form a straight line. So a linear pair would also be supplementary.